I'd like to try to read an article. And who can look on who can't look on an electronic device from where they are? Okay, let's see how we're going to do this. Well, we're going to try this, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to read an article by Piper about the importance of the original languages. Now, it was originally printed in this book, Brothers We're Not Professionals. So someone can take this book, and a couple of you can work here. And if you're looking at the attachments, it starts with the attachment 4. Do you see it? Attachment 4. You have a series of attachments. It's a photocopy of an article. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? You mean? Scan 4. At the very end, this is from our Hebrew book. It says 10.8, Bitzer was a banker. Did you get a series of...
Mine's very blurry.
But will it...
Can somebody clarify?
Yeah. Is everyone on the same page?
10.8.
Yeah, it says 10.8, Bitzer was a banker. Okay. This might be just a little bit, unwieldy as we do this, because we're going to have to switch pages. But Alexia, are you looking at it right now? Let me do something else. Somebody else can read it from my Hebrew book if you want. Who can't see it right now? Okay. Okay, Vitali, why don't you start reading just at the beginning of this article? We're just going to read this article. Bitzer was a banker. Okay, listen. If you can't see it by now, just listen or look on a book or something. Okay, we'll just try this. Okay.
Bitzer was a banker. In 1982, Baker Book House reissued a 1969 book of daily scripture readings in Hebrew and Greek called Light on the Path. The readings were short and vocabulary helps were given with the Hebrew verses. The aim of the editor, who died in 1980, was to help pastors preserve and improve their ability to interpret the Bible from the original languages. His name was Heinrich Bitzer. He was a banker.
Can everyone follow along? Mm-hmm. Okay. If you have to go to the next scan, keep going. Okay. Go ahead, Vitaly.
A banker, brothers, must we be admonished by the sheep as to what our responsibility is as shepherds? Evidently so, for we are surely not admonishing and encouraging each other to press on in Greek and Hebrew. And most seminaries, evangelical as well as liberal, have communicated by their curriculum emphases that learning Greek and Hebrew may have some value for a few rare folks, but is optional for the pastoral ministry.
Good. Alexa, you want to keep going?
Yeah. I have a debt to pay to Heinrich Bitzer, and I would like to discharge it by exhorting all of us to ponder this thesis. The more a theologian detaches himself from the basic Hebrew and Greek text of Holy Scripture, the more he detaches himself from the source of real theology. And real theology is the foundation of a fruitful and blessed ministry. What happens to a denomination when a useful knowledge of Greek and Hebrew is not cherished and encouraged for the pastoral office? I don't mean simply offered and admired. I mean cherished, promoted and sought. Several things happen as the original languages fall into disuse among pastors. First, the confidence of pastors to determine the precise meaning of biblical texts diminishes, and with the confidence to interpret rigorously goes the confidence to preach powerfully. It is difficult to preach week in and week out over the whole range of God's revelation with depth and power if you are plagued with uncertainty when you venture beyond a basic gospel generality.
You get it? If you're not sure what you're speaking about, you can't be bold. Now, this is a banker that's exhorting pastors, right? And by the way, he's not mentioning Aramaic. There's a third language here that the dear doctor needs to be exhorted to, too. Paul Kuzmenko, why don't you go on second?
Second, the uncertainty of having to depend on differing translations, which always involve much interpretation, will tend to discourage careful textual analysis and sermon preparation. For as soon as you start attending to crucial details like tenses, conjunctions, and vocabulary repetitions, you realize that translations are too diverse to provide a sure basis for such analysis. For example, most of the modern English translations, RSV, NIV, NASB, NLT, do not enable the expositor to see that have fruit in Romans 6:22 links with bear fruit 5 verses later in Romans 7:4. They all translate Romans 6:22 without the word fruit.
Now, in our translations, oftentimes one Greek word can be translated many different ways. You can't see it. You can't see how they gloss things over and interpret things. But, would you go ahead and Slavic?
So the preacher then contents himself with the general focus on flavor of the text, and his exposition lacks the precision and clarity
Which excite a congregation.
which excite a congregation with the word of God. Boring generalities occurs in many pulpits. Expositor preaching therefore falls into the diverse and disfavor.
Disuse and disfavor.
Disuse and disfavor. I say disfavor because we often tend to protect ourselves from difficult tasks by minimizing or ignoring their importance.
Anyone does that? Anyone know they have to do something, but that we protect ourselves? We say, oh, we don't really need to do this. I don't need to clean my garage.
So what we find in groups where Greek and Hebrew are not cherished and pursued and promoted is that expositive preaching, which devotes a good bit of the sermon to explain the meaning of the text, is not much esteemed by the preacher or taught in the seminaries.
Good. Alec, you want to keep going? Sometimes.
Sometimes this is evident in outreach,
Outright.
denunciation,
Saying it doesn't matter.
exposition as pedantic and schoolish.
Yeah. Pedantic. Show-offy and intellectually boring. Pedantic and schoolish.
More often, there is a benign neglect.
Sorry. A benign neglect. They don't mean to do harm.
And emphasis on sermonic features like order, diction, illustration, and relevance crowds out the need for careful textual exposition.
Good. Anyone there? One of the girls want to read. Maria, are you in a position to read?
Sure.
Okay.
Another result when pastors do not study the Bible in Greek and Hebrew is that they and their churches with them tend to become second-handers. The harder it is for us to get at the original meaning of the Bible, the more we will revert to the secondary literature. For one thing, it is easier to read. It also gives us a superficial glow that we are keeping up on things, and it provides us with ideas and insights which we can't dig out of the original for ourselves.
So we just start reading the book of the week and quoting other people, canned ideas that even aren't ours. It works for a while, it gets really boring after a while. You can't stay fresh, okay?
We may impress one another for a while by dropping the name of the latest book we've read, but secondhand food will not sustain and deepen our people's faith in holiness. Weakness in Greek and Hebrew also gives rise to exegetical imprecision and carelessness, and exegetical imprecision is the mother of liberal theology.
Exegetical. Analytical, okay. Albina?
Yeah. When pastors can no longer articulate and defend doctrine by a reasonable and careful appeal to the original meaning of biblical text, they will tend to become closed-minded traditionalists who clutch their inherited ideas, or open-ended pluralists who don't put much stock in doctrinal formulations. In both cases, the succeeding generations will be theologically impoverished and susceptible to error.
If we don't really know what it says, we'll either have a tendency to accept everything or go back to our tradition to set limits on it, which are unthinking positions. Keep going, Albina, one more time.
Further, when we fail to stress the use of Greek and Hebrew as valuable in pastoral office, we create an eldership of professional academicians. We surrender to the seminaries and universities essential dimensions of our responsibility as elders and overseers of the churches. I am deeply grateful for seminaries and for Bible-believing, God-centered, Christ-exalting scholars. But did God really intend that the people who interpret the Bible more carefully be one step removed from the weekly ministry of the Word in the church?
So the teachers, week and weekend teachers, are dependent on the seminary professors. The church itself is weak. James?
Acts 20:27 charges us with the proclamation of the whole counsel of God. But we look more and more to the professional academicians for books which fit the jagged pieces of revelation into a unified whole. Acts 20:28 charges us to take heed for the flock and guard it from wolves who rise up in the church and speak perverse things. But we look more and more to the linguistic and historical specialists to fight our battles for us in books and articles. We have by and large lost a biblical vision of a pastor as one who is mighty in the scriptures, apt to teach, competent to compete, and able to penetrate to the unity of the whole counsel of God. Is it healthy or biblical for the church to cultivate an eldership of pastors, weaken the word, and the eldership of professors, strong in the word?
He's amazing, isn't he? Okay, Eldar?
One of the greatest tragedies in the church today is the appreciation of the pastoral office. From seminaries to denominational headquarters, the prevalent mood and theme is managerial, organizational, and psychological. And we think thereby to heighten our professional self-esteem. Hundreds of teachers and leaders put the mastery of the word first with their lips, but by their curriculums, conferences, seminars, and personal example show that it is not for most. One glaring example is the nature of the Doctor of Ministry programs across the country. The theory is good. Continuing education makes for better ministers, but where can you do a
DMin, doctoral ministry?
Hebrew language and exegesis. Yet what is more important and more deeply practical for the pastoral office than advancing in Greek and Hebrew exegesis, by which we mine God's treasures?
Most seminaries would say the original languages are not practical. It means a completely... Michael, can you read? Do you have an electronic device? Okay, one? Okay, as long as you can see one and you can read, you go for it.
Why do hundreds of young and middle-aged pastors devote years of effort to everything but the language when pursuing continuing education? And why do seminaries not offer incentives and degrees to help pastors manage the most important pastoral skill, exegesis of the original meaning of Scripture? Technical difficulties. No matter what we say about the inerrancy of the Bible, our actions reveal our true convictions about the centrality and power. We need to recover our vision of the pastoral office, which embraces, if nothing else, the passion and power to understand the original revelation of God. We need to pray for the day when pastors can carry their Greek New Testaments to conferences and seminaries without being greeted with one-liners.
Greek geek.
Do what?
Greek geek.
The day when the esteem of God's word is carefully exposed,
its careful exposition.
And its careful exposition is so high among pastors that those who do not have the skill will humbly bless and encourage those who do, and will encourage younger men to get what they never got. Oh, for the day when prayer and grammar will meet each other with great spiritual combustion.
He's appealing to the seminaries to teach the languages. I would say we go even one step further. The seminary is not in the Bible. It is the minister's job to train other ministers. Just like it's a shoemaker's job to train a shoemaker. To shop for materials, buy materials, prepare materials, stretch materials, fit materials, and finish materials. If a preacher comes up to a preacher and the preacher can't teach him how to make shoes, there's something wrong. one of the church's problems is that they're relying on the seminary. Now, if you're in the middle of Montana and you don't have anything, you don't have a seminary, tough luck. God says it is your job to train somebody in what you do. Now, I love the seminary, and I just spent all day from 9:30 to 5:30 at the seminary, but it doesn't change a thing. It's my job to train ministers. Now, we can pool resources, and you can go there for a lot of things, but the church is always going to be a week when it can't reproduce one of its greatest functions. That's what we're doing here today. And I love Dr. Piper. I'd only add Aramaic, but I'd say, you know what, we got to get it back into the church. Okay, so having said that, George Mueller. Taras, why don't you...
Okay. In 1829, 24-year-old George Mueller, famous for his faith and prayer in orphanages, wrote, I now studied much, about 12 hours a day, chiefly Hebrew, and committed portions of the Hebrew Old Testament to memory. And this I did with prayer, often falling on my knees. I looked up to the Lord even whilst turning over the leaves of my Hebrew dictionary. In the Methodist Archives of Manchester, you can see 2-volume Greek testaments of the evangelist George Whitfield, liberally furnished with notes on the inner leaf paper. He wrote of his time at Oxford. Though weak, I often spent 2 hours in my evening retirements and prayed over my Greek Testament and Bishop's Hall's most excellent contemplations every hour that my health would permit. Luther said, if the languages had not made me positive as to the true meaning of the word, I might still have remained a chained monk, engaged in quietly preaching Romish errors in the obscurity of a cloister. The Pope, the sophists, and their anti-Christian...
Sophists, philosophers, and their anti-Christian empire.
Anti-Christian empire would have remained unshaken. In other words, he attributes the breakthrough of the Reformation to the penetrating power of the original languages.
Okay, we probably need to kind of... and who wants to finish off here? Who hasn't read? Seth, you want to read?
Luther spoke against the backdrop of 1,000 years of church darkness without the word when he said boldly, it is certain that unless the languages remain, the gospel must finally perish. He asks, do you inquire what use there is in learning these languages? Do you say, we can read the Bible very well in German? And he answers, without languages, we could not have received the gospel. Languages are the scabbard that contains the sword of the Spirit. They are the casket which contains the priceless jewels of antique thought. They are the vessel that holds the wine, and as the gospel says, they are the baskets in which the loaves and fishes are kept to feed the multitude. If we neglect the literature, we shall eventually lose the gospel. No sooner did men cease to cultivate the languages than Christendom declined, even until it fell under the undisputed dominion of the Pope. But no sooner was this torch relighted than this papal owl fled with a shriek into congenial gloom. In former times, the fathers were frequently mistaken because they were ignorant of the languages, and in our days, there are some who, like the Waldenses, do not think the languages of any use. But although their doctrine is good, they have often erred in the real meaning of the sacred text. They are without arms against error, and I fear much that their faith will not remain pure.
Good. Flavia, can you read?
Brothers, perhaps the vision can grow with your help. It is never too late to learn the languages. There are men who begin after retirement. It is not a question of time, but of values.
Absolutely.
John Newton, the author of Amazing Grace, the former sea captain, was a pastor. Pastor with a winsome, gentle love for people who, nevertheless, thought it important to pursue the languages. He once concealed a young minister. The original scriptures well deserve your pains, and will richly repay them. Concerning the early years of studying the languages, he says,
Okay, Galina, can you finish this off here?
You must not think that I have attained or ever aimed at the critical skill of any of these. In the Hebrew, I can read the historical books and songs with tolerable ease, but in prophetical and difficult parts, I'm frequently obliged to have recourse to lexicons, etc. However, I know so much as to be able, with such help as are at hand, to judge for myself the meaning of any passage I have occasion to consult.
Okay, Arena, you want to just finish this off there?
Continuing education is being pursued everywhere. Let's give heed to the word of Martin Luther. As dear as the gospel is to us all, let us heart contend with its language. Bitzer did, and Bitzer was a banker.
Bitzer was a banker, not a pastor. So I'm 50. I just turned 50. Most of you guys are in your 20s. That means if you devote years to your languages now, you will be able to use them for 30 years. And languages are not a good luck charm. They don't automatically give you everything, but they give you the ability to swim on a different level. So when you're preparing, of course, you can memorize, check the translations, check MacArthur, check Piper. But at a certain point, all you can do is rehash their ideas. If you can start swimming on this level, it won't make itself immediately felt. But in 6 months it will. In 2 years, you'll be on a whole different level. In 5 years, you'll be on a different planet. In 10 years, you'll be on a different galaxy. No kidding around. It's just a matter of practice, and it's really enjoyable. I'm going to read you something else about now, I scan you a lot of pages, and they're from the Hebrew book, because mostly, and even in seminaries, people have to be exhorted. People get through Greek tolerably, but nobody wants to do Hebrew. So this was in a Hebrew book saying you have to do both. I say you have to do all three of them. I know so, because this is for God. Now, I was saying in our Slenska that studying Aramaic is completely impractical, but so is breaking a bottle of perfume and putting it on Christ's head. Everyone said this isn't practical. Well, we worship first. We don't worry about the cost because he takes care of the cost. But we're not going to read the final article. It's by Martin Luther. I gave you 4 articles. One is by Bruce Waltke. One is by B.B. Warfield. This third one is by Piper. The fourth one is by Martin Luther. It was written 500 years ago. But you can read that on your own. But I'm just going to read one excerpt from it. And Luther's amazing. It says, since it becomes Christians, just listen to this. I'm just going to give you a snippet here, and you can read the rest. Since it becomes Christians, then, to make good use of the Holy Scriptures as their one and only book, and it is a sin and a shame not to know our own book or to understand the speech and words of our God. It is a still greater sin and loss that we do not study languages. Okay, this is written in 1500, especially in these days when God is offering and giving us men and books and every facility and inducement to the study, and desires his Bible to be an open book. Okay, we have parsing programs, vocabulary, flashcards, books, things up the gazoo. He was writing in 1500. He and Melanchthon would one time spend a whole day on a verse from Job. And he said that he was considering himself to back to Jerome and Augustine's time. And he says, when in this day, God is offering and giving us men and books in every facility to study the original. Oh, how happy the dear fathers would have been if they had our opportunity to study the languages and come thus prepared to the Holy Scriptures. What great toil and effort it cost them to gather up a few crumbs, while we, with half their labor, yes, almost without any labor at all, can acquire the whole loaf. 1500! Oh, how their effort puts our indolence, our laziness to shame. Yes, how sternly God will judge our lethargy and ingratitude. It's really, really sobering stuff. Let me just say a little bit about how you study languages. First, I just want to say a little bit about its value. I think that if you study Greek and stay with it, it'll teach you how to think. Because I'm a father, I think about the different things that I need to put into the minds of my children. And one is reading and writing. Because reading means you fill yourself with information, but is an intake, but writing is an outtake. You have to be able to think through it, organize it, and put it back out in writing. So reading and writing are very important for gathering information and critically thinking it and back, presenting it back. Sports and arts are also very, very important. Sports are there for your body and your fortitude and your teamwork, but arts is there for your refinement, your sense of aesthetic delicacy. And that's all. You don't want to just be a brute. To be a beast is great, but you want to be a refined beast. So you do arts and sports. But linear thinking is also very important, and these go in twos. Mathematics is linear thinkings and symbols. So in order to think in propositions and syllogisms and theorems and corollaries, you need mathematics. But language is to words what mathematics is to symbols. If you're a good mathematician, oftentimes you're a good musician, you can manipulate symbols, but linear thinking with words is language. And it complements linear thinking with mathematics. So it's excellent. So we're really hoping that we develop a whole language community here. People who love the languages, who love worship, but as part of your intellectual development. Another thing that we're going to have to kind of get down is the value of repetition. As we were preaching through the book of Genesis, we were saying that one of the reasons that people were so good is that they lived for 800 years. We live for 20, train for 10, work for 30, and then we die. But if you live for 800 years in good health, if you played piano for 500 years in good health, do you understand how good of a piano player you'd be? So the key to everything is repetition. The key to everything is repetition. And because we're not living in a Greek culture or a Hebrew culture, we don't have the repetition that is already done for us out there. If we were sitting in ancient Babylon or something, they'd just be speaking ancient Aramaic, and they'd be doing a lot of the repetition for us. But here we have to artificially create it, so we have to do a lot of memorizing by rote. And so I will be talking to you a little bit about the learning process, which is nothing more than repetition. Just doing it over and over again, etching it into your mind so those etches become deep and they become grooves so you can't get out of it. Now, one of the things is, I just wanted you to turn to any place. For instance, turn to Machen here if you have, or just anything. You can turn to anything at all. And sometimes we do this. Like if you're in Machen, you can turn to the introduction. Like page 1. And what I'm talking to you about is that there's basically two ways that we learn. We learn visually, out the hand and into the eye, out the hand and into the eye. You write it and it goes into the eye, there's no sound. But you go also out the mouth and into the ear, out the mouth and into the ear. So we're going to be writing Greek, we're also going to be saying Greek. Which one is more important? When you study the learning process, you'll find that the speaking, hearing facet is more important. And I'm just going to prove this to you in one simple demonstration. In the ancient times, like the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8, they read aloud. The silent reading thing only came about in modern times because we have 30 copies of things, and if we all read out loud, we wouldn't be able to hear each other. In ancient times, they didn't have printing presses and stuff, and books were very, very expensive, so you usually only had one copy of something, and somebody would say it out loud. But the point is that basically we speak out loud in a sense anytime we learn. And I'm just going to do this. If you just read this, if you're with me, I don't care what you're reading, but some of you might be reading this. During the classical period, the Greek language was divided into a number of dialects. Do you see that? Now, I want you to read it silently and observe you talking to yourself in your mind. Just read that in your mind. Now, you're talking to yourself. Now, I want you to try to read it without talking to yourself. You can't do it. All teaching is ultimately talking. You're talking to yourself. Read that without talking to yourself? It's impossible. Everything is ultimately coming in. I don't care if you write it. You're still reading it. You're still talking to yourself. And that's ultimately where you live. We were talking about the Psalms, and I was saying one of the amazing things about the Psalms is that, like Alexei Moskowitz, I don't get a chance to look into your heart or listen to what you're saying about me or to God or anything. But if I could, I'd get something pretty much like you get into the Psalms. The psalmist is talking to himself. Oh, my soul, why are you so downcast? He's talking to God, like complaining at times. It's almost like I could go into your prayer class and like open up your heart and listen to you, your deepest, innermost thoughts about God. You know what I mean? But this is kind of where we worship. This is where we exhort ourselves. This is where we commune with God ultimately in our heart of hearts. It's pretty amazing. What I'm saying is that when we're studying Greek, it's going to be a lot of repetition. For a lot of you, that bums you out, but it's everything. Everything is repetition like this. And we're going to have to somewhat artificially create it when we come to a class like this. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the learning process. As you go to these lessons week by week, you'll basically have one lesson a week. And I would suggest that you do this. Like just turn to lesson 1, for instance. Or let's see, just turn to any lesson. Turn to lesson 8 on page 44. Turn to lesson 8 on page 44. Today is Wednesday. So you'll see this. On page 44, you have a lesson, right? Turn to 46 and turn to 46 and 47. You have some material, some things you have to memorize. And then turn, oh, this is a long chapter. Turn to the next one. You have a little bit more material. And then turn to the next one. You have some exercises. You see that? This is actually a bad example. Turn to page 52. Turn to lesson 9. Chapter 8 is actually a little bit unique in the chapter. You have some vocabulary. You have some memorization stuff in that table. Turn to page 54. You have some stuff, and then you have some exercises. So how are you going to study throughout this year? You're basically going to sacrifice this year. What you're not going to do is wait till Tuesday night and try to cram it. You just won't be able, it won't be any fun. What you're going to do is like this. On Wednesday night, you're just going to listen, and we're going to go after homework. And in this particular case, I'll assign to you the next chapter, chapter 10. What you're going to do is tomorrow, Thursday, you're going to pick up chapter 10, and all the chapters except chapter 8 are like 2 or 3 chapters, and you're going to read it. And you're not going to get bummed out. You won't understand any of it. All you're doing is just giving it a first try. You're going to read chapter 10 tomorrow, for instance. Say, I assigned chapter 10. You're going to read it, and you're like, you know what, man, that is I don't understand a thing. That's fine. You spend 12 minutes, you read it. On Friday night, you pick it up, and you read it. And you're like, man, I just don't understand a thing. But you understand a little bit more than you did before. On Saturday, if that's going to be your study day, 3 hours on Saturday night or 3 hours in the afternoon, you kind of take it and mull it over a little bit more, and things start to make more sense. On Sunday, you read it over a couple times, and this is your 5th or 6th time, and you're like, you know what, that's what he was talking about. I'm starting to see what he's talking about. Monday night, you do a little bit of problems. Tuesday night, you finish off. You see what I mean? Don't wait. Do a little bit each time, and don't get bummed. The first time you read the next chapter, you will understand nothing. Deal with it. Get used to it. The day after that, you won't understand very much either. But believe it or not, by the 3rd or 4th day, it's like, you know what? I actually think I know what he's talking about. That's how you're going to do it. But you've got to do the next couple days. Wednesday is going to be Greek burnout. You're not going to want to even think about Greek. Don't. Just pick up the book and read it over. 12 minutes, you're done. Don't do any more than that. The next day after that, 12 minutes, you're done. The next day after that, you're like, you know what? I think I'm getting it. You get what I'm saying? Memorize the paradigms first. Don't use the exercises to memorize. Memorize the paradigms and get them down cold. Just spend an hour doing those. And then just do the exercises, practicing the paradigms you already memorized. Don't try to do the exercises as a means of memorizing your paradigms and having to always go back and forth. Memorize it, knock it out, and you'll be done. You'll do it week in and week out. Does that make sense? So all we've talked about right so far is why we should study and a little bit of how we should study. Okay, we're going to do one more historical thing. I want you to turn to Machen, to the introduction. And we're not going to read this whole thing, but we're going to read probably a little bit, because I want you to read this. This is about 5 pages or 6 pages or so. You really need to read, okay? So everyone should have this. So Vitaly, Murmur, back to you. Just read the first paragraph.
During the classical period, the Greek language was divided into a number of dialects, of which were 3 Greek families: the Doric, the Aeolic, and the Ionic. In the 5th century before Christ, one branch of the Ionic family, the Attic, attained the supremacy, especially as the language of prose literature. The Attic dialect was the language of Athens in her glory, the language of Thucydides of Plato and Demosthenes.
Good.
And of the most of other great prose writers of Greece.
Good. Okay, Alexa, we're back to you. Just read various causes.
Various causes contributed to the Attic dialect dominant in the Greek-speaking world. First and foremost must be put the genius of the Athenian writers, but the political and the commercial importance of Athens was also not without its effect. Hosts of strangers came into contact with Athens through government, war, and trade, and the Athenian colonies also extended the influence of the mother city. The Athenian Empire, indeed, soon fell to pieces. Athens was conquered first by Sparta in the Peloponnesian War, and then in the middle of the 4th century before Christ. Along with the other Greek cities, came under the domination of the king of Macedonia, Philip. but the influence of the Attic dialect survived the loss of political power. The language of Athens became also the language of her conquerors.
Good. Maria, Macedonia?
Macedonia was not originally a Greek kingdom, but it adopted the dominant civilization of the day, which was the civilization of Athens. The tutor of Philip's son, Alexander the Great, was Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, and that fact is only one indication of the conditions of the time. With astonishing rapidity, Alexander made himself master of the whole eastern world, and the triumphs of the Macedonian arms were also triumphs of the Greek language in its Attic form. The empire of Alexander indeed at once fell to pieces after his death in 323 BC, but the kingdoms into which it was divided were, at least so far as the court and the governing classes were concerned, Greek kingdoms. Thus the Macedonian conquest meant nothing less than the Hellenization of the East, or at any rate it meant an enormous acceleration of the Hellenizing process which had already begun.
Okay, one more. Albina, you want to read When the Romans?
When the Romans in the last 2 centuries before Christ conquered the eastern part of the Mediterranean world, they made no attempt to suppress the Greek language. On the contrary, the conquerors, to a very considerable extent, were conquered by those whom they conquered. Rome herself had already come under Greek influence, and now she made use of the Greek language in administering at least the eastern part of her vast empire. The language of the Roman Empire was not so much Latin as it was Greek.
Good, and I'll finish. Thus, in the first century after Christ, Greek had become a world language. That's why God chose it to write the New Testament. It was the world language. Okay? I want you to read the rest of this historical essay. It's only 3 pages, but it'll help you out. Okay? So for today, it's basically an introduction. And we're going to go to page 1, or it's really page 9. It's page 1 of the first chapter. And we're going to concentrate basically on this first page and the middle of the second page. Okay? Now, we'll turn to page 10, the second page, just for a second. Because in any language you study, there's 5 vowels. A, E, I, O, and U. I don't care if it's Japanese, I don't care if it's Hebrew, taught Hebrew all day, it's the same. Because the vowels are the sound carriers, and they're determined by the physics of your mouth. And since everyone has the same human mouth, there's only 5 vowels, A, E, I, O, and U. How they're represented is a little bit different, but if you just kind of look at this, you can basically discern an A on the left-hand side, an A, what looks like an E, close enough, an O, and there's an I and a U. They're not quite in that order. Okay, so just remember that in any language, there's 5 vowels. They may have a long form A and a short form A. They may have a long form E and a short form E, but there's only 5 vowels, even though you can subdivide them a little bit. Okay? Now, I just want you to keep that in mind, and let's go to this first page. There's a reason I said that, and go to the alphabet, because this is where we're going to have to start. Now, you'll recognize here that there's 4 columns. The first is capital letters. The second are small letters. And we are going to concentrate on the second column only, because this was the type of letters they used in most of their letters and manuscripts. The capital letters were basically for inscriptions. They were chiseled onto monuments, and they're very important. But for our purposes, we're not going to be reading monuments and inscriptions in archaeology. We're going to be reading letters. So we're going to deal with the second column. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 things basically. We're going to recognize the characters and the order. We're going to recognize what the symbols look like and recognize what the symbols are called. So there's a symbol, like there's a symbol named A, and then there's the sound that represents A or A. Okay? Now, in order to do that, one of the things that we always do when we memorize is that we don't memorize by bits. I mean, you haven't counted this, but if you did, you'd find that there's 24 letters. We don't memorize 24 bits. We chunk information, because if you can chunk it and package it, you can cram more information in. Okay? So if you were to look down this list and count them, you would find that there's 24. But we're not going to memorize 24 bits. We're going to split them in 6 quads. A quad is a group of 4, and 4 times 6 is 24. And it makes information easier if you chunk it, not smithereen it. So for the purpose of memorizing, I want you to take a pencil or whatever writing instrument you have and split the groups by 4. In other words, just if you don't want a mistake, just listen to me. The first, you can look at the third column because you can read the third column because that's the name. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, you can write a line because that separates the first four. Epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, you could write a line because it separates the next four. Iota, kappa, lambda, mu, you could write a line because it separates the third from the fourth. Nu, Xi, Omicron, P, you can write a line. That's pi of 3.14 of mathematical fame, of circumference and these kind of things. Then rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, you can write a line, and you will find out that if you draw 5 lines, you will put them into 6 groups. So first group, or we call it A quad, is alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Then you'll have a line. The second quad, which you'll call E quad, is epsilon, zeta, eta, theta. The third group, which we'll call I quad, is iota, kappa, lambda, mu. The fourth quad, which is called the O quad, is nu, Xi, omicron, P. The fifth quad, which which we call U quad, is rho, sigma, tau, upsilon. The last quad, which we call omega or longo quad, is phi, he, psi, omega. Now, not only does it separate everything into equal bits, which gives it a certain rhythm when we do that, but you'll find when you do that, each quad has one and only one vowel in it. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta has the only A. Epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, there's 2 E's in there, but E doesn't exist in any other quad. Iota, kappa, lambda, mu has the only I in it. Nu, Xi, omicron, P has omicron and O in it. Right? Rho, sigma, tau, upsilon has the U in it, and the last one, phi, chi, psi, omega, has a long O. Can you compare omicron with omega? Do you see those in the omicron and omega? Micro means small o, omega means big O, like mega, micro, okay? So we've got A quad, E quad, I quad, let's see, I quad, small o, omicron quad, small o quad, U quad, and omega quad. Do you get it? 6 groups of 4, all with one characteristic vowel that never gets mixed up. Now what we have to do is memorize that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start you off with one quad. One quad. Your quad is going to be A quad, and you're going to be, as I'm assigned, you're going to be alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Vitaly, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta. Seth, iota, kappa, lambda, mu. Iota, kappa, lambda, mu. Alexei, nu, Xi, omicron, P. And you can be reading through this so you can see the right. I know it's pi. I've been in geometry. I've been in algebra 2 and all this kind of stuff. Okay, nu, Xi, omicron, P. Rho, sigma, tau, upsilon. Phi, he, psi, omega. For those of you who take Hebrew, they're starting to realize that a lot of the Cyrillic alphabet, the sha, and the set, come from Hebrew. But Chadashol, like that he, and Fyodor, that F, you know where that comes from? That didn't come from Moscow. That came from Athens. You get it? That F and that he, that is not from Moscow. Okay, so you got phi, chi, psi, omega. Paul, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Angelina, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta. James, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, Xi, omicron, P, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, omega, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, Dima, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, Tadas, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, Alexei, nu, Xi, omicron, P, Alex, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, Victor, phi, chi, psi, omega, Vlad, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Okay? Practice your quad, please. Just practice it a couple times silently together. Good. Now, already we got a lot better. Already reduced it from 3 to 2. There's no secrets, guys. There's no secrets to anything. There's no secrets to basketball. There's no secrets to finance. There's no secrets to Greek. You just have to do it. And you should just make it fun. Make ick, lemon, rust you, whatever you need to do, you do it. And that's it, okay? So when you look at number 1, I will explain some of these things more next time, but we're not going to deal with the capital letters. You'll realize that mathematics deals heavily with this. Delta is a summation sign. Also, a delta of rivers is shaped like this. It's from the Greek root. You'll see English derivations all over from Greek. Okay, but we're not going to deal with the first column. You did the second column. In your email, I gave you a computer program that'll help you with your penmanship. It's not nearly as crucial in Greek as it is in Hebrew because the letters are so similar. So I don't stress penmanship in Greek so much because it's Occidental, it's Western. And when you get to Eastern brushstrokes, it's a whole different story. But check it out and just kind of basically remember that some of those are counterintuitive. They basically start from the left and go to the right. But there's a YouTube program that'll help you with that. But I'm not worried about these because most of these are Western letters. And if you do it the Greek brushstroke way or your ways, remember, they didn't have these pens, they had these brushstrokes. When you do a brushstroke, there's a plop and a spread. You know what I mean? There's a plop and then there's a spread. But we don't do that. Just look at the YouTube video. You know the names and the order, and then the pronunciation guide is pretty much there for you. The only one that's really kind of hard is Xi, right? Nuxi, which is K-S-I, Ka-sa-I, Xi. That's it. Yeah, that's hard. Okay. Sorry. It's got a little bit of a Z, but if you know the John Get dogs or the Vadov, I mean, you guys got some wild consonant clusters. You guys shouldn't. This TK, I don't get it. But anyway, that's fine. Everyone has them. Now, turn to page 10 because we need to. You'll find you'll learn a lot about your language also. The more you do languages, especially in that part of the world where they all mixed up, it becomes. Now, let's go to number 3, which are vowels. There's a short and a long variety. Can you look at that? A-E-I-O-U, which is now we know as alpha, epsilon, omicron, iota, and upsilon. Now, the long variety, remember this. The intonation and cantillation and the music of ancient Greek has largely been lost. So some of this we probably won't be able to reconstruct. So some of it doesn't make quite sense. But there's a long and a short variety. And in 3 of the 5, you can't tell the difference in the symbol. Just like cat is different from cake, you have to kind of figure out if there's an E on the end. The A symbol can be, you get what I mean. It could be father, or fat, a. You just can't tell, okay? So it's not that strange. But the A looks the same either way. So 1, 4, and 5, the A looks the same either way. So does the I and the U. Do you see that? The only distinct symbol that separates long and short are for the E and the O. The epsilon as opposed to the eta, and the O micro, the little o, as opposed to the omega. So that is how we get these 6 quads. There's an A quad, I quad, U quad, plus an epsilon and eta are in the same quad, and O and little o and big O. Okay, but you just have to recognize that as a distinction right now. Why that's important, and by the way, it's very important, is not going to be important right now. But it's not that difficult. So just remember that there's a short A, which looks like a long A, short I looks like a long I, short U. The only difference is the epsilon with the long E eta. There's a little o and a big O. That's all you have to remember for right now. It'll be very important, but it's not hard, so just kind of do that. That would really be great. Now, 4, a diphthong. Look at number 4. Di comes from the word di. Thong means two things that are combined. And what we're basically talking about is sometimes vowels can combine to make a combined sound. And the diphthongs that you need to know are on the top of page 11. I'll just read them. A-I-E-I-O-I, A-U-E-U-O-U, and U-I. So there's 7 of them. And basically what you have to remember here is if you take the I and the U out for a second, of the 5, if you take the I and the U out, you're left with A-E-O. If you take the I and put them on the remaining 3, you get A-I-E-I-O-I. If you take the U and put it on the 3, you get A-U-E-U-O-U. And then if you take those 2 and just make one combination with the U first, you get U-I. You get it? What we're basically talking about with diphthong combinations of vowels, the I's and the U's are always on the end, except when they collide, the U comes first. Look what I'm talking about. The AI has an I on the end, EI has an I on the end, OI has an I on the end. AU has a U on the end, EU has a U on the end, OU has an E on the end. When they come together, the I always loses. So the I's always on the end, and the U's always on the end unless it combines with an I. That's easy to get. Now, when you combine the sound, just combine them. Instead of I is I-O. A-I is and I put together. Just mush it together. I, you get I. Okay? A is fate. Epsilon I, A is fate. Oi is oi. You guys Ukrainians say this all the time. Oi, right? There it is, right there. Okay. Now, EU is youth, like few. OU is foo. Few as opposed to foo. And UI is queen. You just mush them together in 7 combinations and you get the natural result. Is there any problem with that? Okay. That's basically all. Now, you can read some of this stuff. Now, there are other diphthongs, but don't worry about them. Just stick with these for right now. What I'm basically doing is giving you a preview of the chapter because you've never seen it before. But tomorrow, you're going to pick this up and spend 12 minutes to do it. And you want to understand anything that's going on. And then the next day, you say, oh, that's what you're going to do. All right? So I'm not going to go through every detail now, and nor will I ever. You just have to read it. But it's never more than 12 minutes of reading. The 5th time is like 2 minutes. You're like, oh, I got what I'm saying. Okay. So there are other diphthongs. That is not a exhaustive list. It's just, get you started. Okay. Now I'm gonna just say one thing that I'm skip ahead. Like I caramba. It's a very Hispanic diphthong, and oi is a very Ukrainian diphthong. The Ukrainian and the Spanish diphthong of all these diphthongs are considered short. The rest are considered long. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. It's a preview for the next chapters. But the Hispanics and the Ukrainians are short. Everything else is long. Okay? I'm telling you, part of Greek is thinking up of completely ridiculous mnemonic devices. Okay. Now, we've talked about alphabet order. We've talked about vowels. We've talked about diphthongs. 7 combinations. I's always last. I and you are always last until they come together. Okay. I'm going to go to vowel 5. And we're talking about breathing or how much air you put in. So if I say k, that's a kappa. If I say it's a harasho, it's a he, right? So a lot of times pronunciation is a matter of how much air you breathe into it. Okay, check this out. A vowel or a diphthong at the beginning of a word always has a breathing symbol. Now, there's basically only 2 breathing symbols, and they exist above the vowel. Look at under 5, the 2nd paragraph. The rough breathing, which is a left quote, a left single quote. Do you see that? Indicates an H sound. You put air into it. The smooth breathing, which is a right quote, means nothing. Okay? So they give you an example. Thus, epsilon nu, which is N, with a right quote is nothing, because the right quote is nothing. It's a smooth breathing. But if I turn it around, look at the very end of that line, En with the left quote, it's hen. Now that's not hard. A left quote has breath, a right quote's nothing. So you might say, well, why would they even put it in? Just hang in there. But for right now, be glad that you don't have to know anything more. Now there's only 2 other things that we need to do for today, and that is to, besides breathing marks, there's also accent marks. I can't remember if Russian has accent marks.
Udarение.
You do. I mean, besides Yakuzdak and those are hard soft. Okay. Well, we have these. French has them big time, and Greek has them. And originally, they were probably voice inflection marks. Like Chinese is all up and down the place, but that's largely been lost. But there's basically 3 of them, and for right now, you don't have to know where to put them on. You just have to be able to recognize them. They won't make much sense now. They will make sense later, but for right now, you just have to know what the symbols are. And they're always above the letters. There's 3 accents. A down slash to the left is acute. The circumflex is a circular hat, and the grave is down to the right. A slash to the left is an acute, circumflex, and a grave is a slash down and to the right. You got them there? And once in a while, if you turn over to 12, the breathing marks and the accent marks will combine. So that first Greek example on page 12 where it says, thus oiku, omicron, iota, kappa, omicron, upsilon. By the way, those are diphthongs. The first one is oi, that's a Ukrainian. And the second one is o. But it has, above the oi, a acute because it's down and to the left, plus in front of it a smooth breathing mark. That's just a combination of 5 and 6 from the previous page. 5 was breathing marks, 6 was accent marks. They can occur simultaneously. Does this make any sense yet? No. But good. Just, there's not much to remember. I gave you a worksheet that will help you do it. But for right now, it's just like anything. You have to get terminology down. Right? If you're going to play baseball, you have to figure out what the terminology is. That's all else we're doing. The second example, oikos, omicron, iota, kappa, omicron, sigma, above that first iota has a smooth breathing mark with a circumflex. So they put one on top of the other. Now, we have one more thing that we have to do, and that's punctuation. This has nothing to do with pronunciation. It has to do with stop and start signs in the sentence of the reading. Comma slows you down, period stops you, all this kind of stuff. Okay? There are 4 punctuation marks. The comma is the same. It slows you down. The period stops you. It's the same. Both written on the line that correspond to the comma and the period in English. The colon isn't 2 dots, it's just the top dot. It's a major stop. It's a stoplight, so to speak. And then the question mark is actually a semicolon. And those are in real Greek manuscripts. It's my THM thesis. I had to take a 14th century Greek manuscript, and it's wild. They have pictures on it, little notes on it, and each person has their own scribe. I'll show you it to you sometime. A real manuscript doesn't look like the edited version, you have in your Greek Bible. It's really authentic. It's got burned out places in it, and things like this. But those are real Greek punctuation marks. So, what are you going to do for next week? Let's just review what we've learned. Go back to page 1. You're not going to learn, first of all, you're going to read the chapter in its entirety because I just gave you a preview. But you're not going to worry about the capital letters, but you're going to know the names in the order and basically the sounds they represent. But we're dealing with a Western language. The sounds are basically the same. This isn't Japanese or something. You're going to practice writing it a little bit on YouTube, but you're not going to worry about it so much because they're Western characters. You're going to make sure you know the 5 vowels in their long and short forms. You're going to make sure you know the 7 diphthongs. They all have an I or a U at the end. One of them has U at the beginning. You're going to realize you're going to look at the 2 different types of breathing, rough and smooth, a right quote and a left quote. The 3 types of accent, acute, circumflex, and grave. And then the 4 punctuation marks, and that's all you're going to do. Okay? Now, it's going to be a matter of memorization, but for instance, what I gave you is a PDF that looks like this. Machen chapter 1, alphabet, long, short, diphthongs, breathing marks, accents, and punctuation. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4. It's got 6 times 4. Okay, by the way, I gave it to you in a blank form too, so that you can practice. What you do is I gave you an answer key, which is chapter 1 in 1 page. And then I gave you a practice sheet. You print out the answer key, and then you print 5 blanks, and you just do it. You do it mindlessly at first, mechanically at first, just like kids learn language. It doesn't matter. It's not, So there it is. Those are the 24 letters. Those are the long and short. A, I, and U don't have 2 forms. The E and the O do have 2 forms. An epsilon and an eta, okay. And I just mapped it out for you. That's all I did. These are the diphthongs. The I diphthongs, there's 4 of them. A, I, E, I, O, I, U, I, A, U, E, U, O, U, right? There's 2 types of breath marks, left and right. There's 3 types of accents. And then there's 4 types of punctuation. So you will be absolutely, completely caught up 100% in Greek for next week if you read the chapter and be able to do this worksheet. And basically, every week is just a little bit more than that. Okay? Now, I want you to read the historical essay. If you want to, read Martin Luther, read Bruce Waltke, read B.B. Warfield. I'll say a little bit more next week since we're not reading these historical articles about why I continue to use this old text instead of some of the new texts. The bottom line is I think the old grammarians are just, they can't be beat. The old commentaries still can't be beat. We can add a little bit to them, but they're still the bedrock of which we're all doing. There you go. Okay, so let me just say one other thing. And when I sent you this email, what are all the things that I gave you? You'll see that in this email. I gave you a Greek class schedule, so you can just see what we're doing every week, basically. I gave you a Greek font, so you can start to type Greek on your own. I gave you the blank sheet and the answer sheet, and I gave you the writing program, the YouTube writing program that will have a guy actually write. If you do that, you've completed the first week of Greek fabulous. All right? So that's it. This should be one of the fun. It should be coming in here and playing a video game every Wednesday. It should be fun. Okay? So that's it. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, come to me. Yeah.
Did Jesus speak in Greek or Hebrew?
I'm sure you could do both, but I think it's Greek. Those are the very words that are reported. I mean, Greek. You know, above the cross, it was Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. I'm sure you could speak all three, but everyone is speaking Greek at the time, and he's quoted in Greek. I know people say there's a Jewish Aramaic underneath it, but when the gospel writers quote him, I think they're quoting his very words.
Wow.
Yes. Any other questions? I want you guys to have fun. You can study in partners, do your program, but for right now, print the answer key, print 5 sheets, do it once a day. You'll be in perfect shape for next Wednesday. Okay? If you have any questions, you call me. We'll have a thank you. Thank you.